Today's lecture, we will be dealing with Confucius, his ideology and the value system. We have the social origin of Confucius, Confucian texts, particularly the 4 books. Then we have the philosophy of Confucius and the value system. And then we have the philosophy of the later Confucians. And in course of our discussion, we'll also be dealing with the nature of Confucian teachings. When we deal with the history of China, we come across terms like scholar official, scholar gentry, or simply scholars. These are very familiar terms. And in fact, the Chinese scholars throughout history have studied Confucian texts, Confucian teachings, and they have annotated and re-annotated, made annotation and re-annotation of those classics. And all of them were very proud of the cultural heritage of China. And they felt that China stood at the center of the earth and all others stand on the periphery. It was the center. This was the middle kingdom idea, middle concept idea. China stood at the middle and all the countries of the world stood on the periphery, on the borderline. And some among those scholars had the time, had the wealth, of course they had the wealth, and a leisure time to study classics and sit for Confucian examinations, a series of Confucian examinations, imperial examinations, and after passing those examinations, they became entitled to get top official posts. And when they became officials, they were not just officials, they were scholar officials. And when they became scholar officials, they utilized that position to amass wealth, a fabulous amount of wealth. And what they also did was to give advice to the rulers. They became the advisors to the rulers. They wrote dynastic histories. It was they who adorned the court or the whole administrative structure. And they were known as a scholar gentry officials who were tools of the rulers from one dynasty to another. So it was these gentry or scholar officials who became very important in the ancient history of China. Now, it was during the rule of the Han Dynasty. Han Dynasty followed after the Qin. That was 206 BC to 220 AD. That Confucianism became the official doctrine of the ruling state. And Confucius was transformed into a model for scholars, transformed from a model for scholars into a patron saint of the scholar officials. Now the question is, why is Confucianism so powerful? And in fact, from then on, that is important, it was from then on for about 24 centuries. It was the Confucian teachings which bound the Chinese society together. And the Chinese children, they were advised, they were taught to recite Confucian classes, Confucian ethics in their schools, right from their school days. And so the question that naturally arises was why this was so, why was it so long lasting and so powerful? Confucius belonged to the period of the Zhou dynasty, 551 BC. That was when he was born. The dominant political structure of the Zhou dynasty was fiefdom. Most of the official positions were held by slave-owning aristocracy, by hereditary right, and the fiefs were hereditary. And together with this social structure, there arose a complex code of rights, that is RITES, rights, known as the Zhou rights. And it was those Zhou rights which governed the states, their rulers, their rights and duties and privileges, from the highest to the lowest in the hierarchy. And these Zhou rights were regarded as unalterable principles, like those which govern and regulate the movements of heavenly bodies. Confucius was born in an aristocratic family. It is pertinent to point out that though he was born and reared in an aristocratic family, Confucius, quite naturally, never questioned the nature of that society. but fully supported it. And in fact, he developed that society or contributed to its own development by formulating theories on various aspects of the nature of man and of the outside world. As I have pointed out earlier, that towards the end of the spring and autumn period, the slave owning classes had been declining and there was growing unrest and uprisings by the slaves. Big states had been conquering small states like our 16 Mahajanapado's time. The only difference was that we have in China there were hundreds of such states. According to one account, there were 1,800 states in China. And those who were big, they started to gobble up the smaller one. And ultimately it came down to 100 or something like that in course of time over some centuries. Now that was the spring and autumn period, and we have also the warring states period. That is what is warring states period is all about. And an advanced mode of production emerged. That was a feudal mode which gave rise to social economic progress and a new social class, the feudal class. Now Confucius was against both the risings by the slaves as also against the feudal forces. And he always talked about return to the rights. That is, return to the true rights. That is, he wanted to let the slave-owning aristocrats return to power. Return to rights means return to power. Now, this period, the spring and autumn period or the warring states period, these were periods of tremendous turmoil, no doubt. But side by side, it was a period of great cultural blossoming and 100 schools of thought. Confucius simply represented one school of thought, and along with others, he was a teacher. Like Buddha, he was a teacher. But unlike Buddha, he, along with others, moved from the court of one governor to another to have a hearing so that they could get some job and could get themselves integrated with the ruling state apparatus. And actually what made Confucianism so important in history was its sheer conservatism. It was very much conservative in character and it always supported the status quo. Although Confucius became the founder of a school of thought, he himself did not compose any doctrinal works, except one, and that is Annals of the State of Lu. Lu was a state of which he was a governor at one point of time, and he wrote a text, Annals of the State of Lu. The most important book is the Analects, Confucian Analects, edited by many persons. It has been edited by Ezra Pound. It had been also been edited by many persons. And it was the Analects which contains his sayings and conversations, like our Tripitaka, Buddhist Tripitaka, which contains teachings, conversations of Buddha. And in fact, the Analects is regarded as the Confucian Bible. Actually, these teachings were compiled and amplified by others in two other treatises, two other texts. One was the Great Learning or the Higher Education. That is another text, maybe the third one. And this book constitutes the gateway through which beginners enter into the path of virtue. And the other was the Doctrine of the Mean or the Golden Mean. This is important for understanding Confucian philosophy. The Golden Mean or the Doctrine of the Mean. Now, these were the four books which century after century every Chinese schoolboy had to recite. In Confucius' opinion, heaven, art, and man were one unified and harmonious whole, preordained by heavenly principles. Everything on earth, including the status of human beings, was decided by heaven. As to the question how to govern a state and rule the people, Confucius said that the essential requisite was to revive and adopt the principles and practices, laws and regulations of kings of ancient dynasties. He was going back to the past, ancient past, distant past, and he opposed the rising class of landowners, and he hated the slave uprisings. And he devoted his whole attention to that principle, restrain oneself and return to the rights. That is, return to the true rights. And in fact, this was the basic idea. This was a political idea of the Confucian school, the rule of the rights, the rule of the true rights. One Chinese scholar, Bai Shui, as also many other scholars, they hold that Confucianism to some extent was reformist in character. Confucius proposed that good and talented people, irrespective of their social status, should be appointed to official posts. That is, career should be open to talents. That is the essence of the idea. Now, such an idea was contrary to the prevailing practice of hereditary rule. Joseph Needham was discussing this issue. He noticed the germs of the modern bureaucratic system in this principle, that is, career open to talents. The important point is, if it is theoretically accepted that social status is irrelevant here, it is also true that not all people were in a position to do that. Because who would be able to do that? Only those people who had that talent, who had the time, wealth, and who had the time to pass Confucian examinations. Because you are studying to become an official. That is another element in Confucius' teachings, that one is studying to become an official, and to become an official, that is the scholar official, you must have wealth and you must have the leisure, the time to do so. And it is needless to say that common people did not have either the wealth or the leisure to do so. Now, Confucius, at this side by side, he stressed the importance of benevolence, regarded it as the highest ideal of morality. Yet, according to him, benevolence meant different grades of love. More love for those who were close, and less love for those who were distant. More for the highly placed, and less for the lowly. That is very important. In Confucius's writings, there is a clear line of demarcation between the superior and the inferior, between the high and the low, between the mental labor and physical labor. One of his students, Fan Chi, asked his master about how to grow grain. But the master said he was not a farmer, so he was not in a position to answer. When asked about how to grow vegetables, he said he was not a market gardener. And then when Fan Chi went out, Confucius said to some other students, "What a small man, poor Fan Chi." It shows the difference between the high and the low. All the questions were related to lowly people, with which lowly people were associated. So Confucius is a sage. So how can he be in a position to answer those questions? After Confucius' death, we have his disciples, a long list of disciples, and disciples of disciples, and so on and so forth. And that is the reason why the Confucian ideology continued for 24 centuries. It is something totally unprecedented. The most important follower or disciple of Confucius was Mencius. Like Confucius, he also divided human beings into two main classes, the superior and inferior. The former was knowledgeable and wise, and the latter was stupid. And this was also unalterable. We are citing a few quotations to show this class division. One who does not know the mandate of heaven cannot be a superior man. One who does not know the rights cannot stand up as a man. The superior man fears heaven, important people, and the words of sages. The inferior man does not understand the mandate of heaven, is disrespectful towards important people, and insults the words of sages. The superior man thinks of virtue. The inferior man thinks about the soil. The superior man is diligent in governing the state. The inferior man exerts his physical strength. Those who work with their minds govern. Those who work with their hands are governed. Women and inferior people are hard to nurture. They are hard to get along with. They get out of hand when befriended and resent it when kept at a distance. As one can see, some ideas clearly emerge from these statements. First of all, the society is divided into classes between the superior people and inferior people. That is one. The second is that it also highlights the difference between mental labor and physical labor. That must have been particularly sharp in those times. And in fact, this difference, incidentally, is one of the three great differences which, in Marx's opinion, emerged in course of the emergence of class society. And the third one, women were also treated as inferior people. Now, at a much later period and in a totally different historical context, Mao Zedong wrote that the Chinese people had 3 ropes round their necks, but the women had 4: political authority, clan authority, religious authority, and the authority of the husband. And these were the authorities that which embodied the whole feudal and patriarchal ideology and social system. Now, the philosophy and the value system raised by Confucius and his followers became urgent after 1840, when China suffered humiliating defeats during the time of the First Opium War, and the Treaty of Nanking was signed in 1842. Now, the common people were very much enraged and tried to fight foreign powers back. The scholar gentry, the scholar bureaucrats, they also felt humiliated that a heaven-ordained Confucian world should be defeated, should be bullied by the barbarians from afar. That was something which was unacceptable to them. So a new idea arose from that time, that is Confucian scholarship, Confucian knowledge, Confucian ethics, morality, value system, etc. These are not enough. They need to supplement it with Western science and technology. That idea emerged from then on. That was a new experience, new education. The imperial examination, the old Confucian examination, that was abolished in 1906. And modern schools on Western lines, particularly American patterns, these were introduced.
Sir, it is evident that Confucius upheld the slave society and he supported the slave owning class. But later, since Confucianism had a hold for 24 centuries, later with the emergence of feudalism, did it also, upheld the feudal structure or complement it somehow?
That is an important part of Confucian teachings. Confucius belonged to the slave-owning dynasty. That was a period of the Zhou dynasty, Eastern Zhou dynasty. It was a slave society. There was a slave-owning nobility. And he always championed the principle of return to the rights and always told about studying to become officials. And when he was alive, during his lifetime, he opposed the newly emerging feudal forces, and definitely he also opposed, quite naturally, the slave rebellions, the slaves. But when he died, after his death, and when his tradition was continued by his disciples, his followers, for centuries together, the society had also underwent a change. In fact, we have the first feudal empire. That is important. One important point is that when the Qin Shi Huangdi established the first feudal empire in China, the Qin dynasty of China, he destroyed many Confucian writings. Many Confucian writings. He belonged to the legalist school. Legalist school is one school of the 100 schools of thought. Anyway, now, but after the end of Qin rule, when Han they came, they restored Confucius, as I have said. Now, that period was a feudal period, not the slave one. The Qin period, the Han period, both feudal periods, and the dynasties which followed them. They appropriated Confucian ideology, the Confucian system. And since Confucian system supported the status quo, it supported the old slave society when Confucius was alive. And after his death, many centuries after his death, the theory remained, and there were annotations and re-annotations, explanations and more explanations, and so on and so forth. So all these they provided the philosophical basis for the feudal system, because it was a different situation. So feudal society, feudal forces absorbed Confucius at a later period when they were firmly entrenched in power, like the slave owners during the time of Confucius himself or earlier period. So the situation was different in a new period. So Confucian ideology served the slave society earlier, and it was serving the feudal system later, because the tradition continued and the system of scholar officials providing philosophical basis, giving advice to the rulers, writing court histories and other things, they became very much part of the existing ruling state apparatus in the subsequent centuries during the feudal epoch. That is how the same ideology, of course, with changes, there were additions, newer and newer additions. They were serving a new system now. There is a feudal system, and a new system also welcomed that ideology into their fold, and that became a part of the state apparatus.
What do the 100 school of thoughts deal with?
It was 100 schools of thought deals actually with the period of the spring and autumn period. Spring and autumn period was a period, as I have said, cultural blossoming. And there are many schools of thought emerged. Confucian ideology was one, Taoism was another, Mohism was another. Legalist school, the most important of them, legalist school. And this is important because legalists wanted to have one unified legal system throughout the country. In the earlier period, before the coming of the Qin, during the time of the Zhou dynasty, Eastern Zhou dynasty, different provinces, different states had their own legal system. There was no one unified legal system. But since there was an emergence of new forces, feudal forces, there was a need for one unified legal system that would unify China. Political part was done by the Qin Shi Huangdi, who defeated his rivals, important rivals, in battle. And he belonged to the legalist school also, Qin Shi Huangdi. And he, naturally the legalist school served because he developed in one uniform legal system. He introduced the legalist system and he destroyed all other writings, Confucian writings, and only introduced the legalist writings. Of course, there are many things which survived the onslaught. It was not possible for him to destroy or burn all Confucian writings. Otherwise, we were not in a position to get any Confucian writings at all. It was not exactly the similar situation regarding the Lokayato school of thought. The Lokayato Charbak school, Charbak's writings are all lost, destroyed by the Brahmins in our country. Nothing remained. Only through Purva Pakko, that is through their enemies, through their adversaries, that we come to know of. Now, that did not take place. Anyway, so legalist school was an important school of the 100 schools of thought, which became very important and which formed a theoretical basis of course, which advocated one unified law throughout the country, and which became, apart from other things, became the philosophical basis of the first feudal empire, that is the Qin Empire, established by Qin Shi Huangdi. Now we'll make a brief summing up of what we have discussed so far. Now we have been dealing with the nature of the Chinese society and the various social groups and classes from the bygone days. We highlighted particularly the gentry, the scholar gentry or the scholar officials, which became the real ruling classes in China. And we have also covered Confucius, his ideology and the value system, his ethics, morality, etc. And we have also tried to explain how the Confucian ideology could have such a long-lasting impact, long-lasting hold, grip over the Chinese society and polity.